Seth,
Victoria
step away
Ashford's
from fuss
voice cut through
immediately.
the cabin
This
like
section is
ice,
for our
her
premium
perfectly
passengers, not people
manicured
like
finger
you.
pointing toward economy. The words hung in the recycled air of Aerolux Flight 447 like a slap across the face. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Cold, calculated, rehearsed. She stood there in her tailored navy uniform, blonde hair pulled back in a flawless chignon, diamond earrings catching the overhead lights. Everything about Victoria screamed privilege and power. Her red lipstick was perfect, her posture commanding, her blue eyes filled with the kind of entitlement that comes from never being told no. She had no idea that in exactly 18 minutes the man in the hoodie standing before her would fire her, ground the plane, and restructure the entire airline. The man she was dismissing stood quietly, holding a first-class boarding pass in his hand. Marcus Thompson, 42 years old, wore a charcoal gray designer hoodie, dark jeans, and white sneakers. To Victoria, he looked like he'd stumbled into the wrong terminal. To anyone who really knew power, he looked like a man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But Marcus wasn't just anyone. He was the CEO of Thompson Ventures, and as of 6:30 that morning, he owned 78% of Aerolux Airlines. The acquisition papers were still warm from the printer in his briefcase. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice steady and calm, "I have a ticket for Seat 2A. I'd like to board now." Victoria's perfectly painted lips curled into a smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm sure there's been some kind of mistake. Perhaps you used points from a family member. These premium seats require appropriate verification." Behind her, passengers in the gate area were starting to turn and stare. A young woman with long brown hair and a phone already in her hands was positioning herself for a better view. Ashley Morgan, 26 social media influencer with 50,000 followers, could smell drama from a mile away. She'd already started recording. "Y'all," Ashley whispered into her phone, "something's happening at Miami Airport right now. This is about to get real." Captain Robert Mitchell's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin boarding for Flight 447 to Chicago. First-class passengers and our premium members, please approach the gate." Victoria straightened her shoulders, smoothed her skirt, and looked Marcus up and down like he was a problem she needed to solve. What she couldn't see was the storm brewing behind his calm exterior. What she couldn't know was that this moment would be replayed on every major news network within the next 4 hours. Sir Victoria said, her voice rising just enough for everyone nearby to hear, "I'm going to need you to step aside while we handle our priority passengers." Marcus Thompson smiled. It was the kind of smile that never meant anything good, but it was polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying if you knew how to read it. "Of course," he said, "I wouldn't want to delay the flight." The countdown had begun. At 6:30 that morning, Marcus Thompson had walked out of the most important board meeting of his life. The emergency session had lasted 4 hours with lawyers, accountants, and executives from 3 countries connected via video link. The deal was done. Thompson Ventures had just acquired Aerolux Airlines for $3.8 billion in cash. It wasn't just business, it was personal. 20 years ago, Marcus's mother, Dorothy Thompson, had been removed from an Aerolux flight for suspicious behavior. Her crime, using a first-class ticket that her employer had purchased for a business trip. The gate agent couldn't believe a black woman from Atlanta could afford premium travel. They'd made her prove her ticket was legitimate 3 different ways before grudgingly allowing her to board, only to have the flight attendant treat her like a criminal the entire flight. Dorothy never flew Aerolux again. She never forgot. And when she raised her son to build businesses and create wealth, she made sure he never forgot either. Baby, she'd told Marcus when he graduated from Morehouse College, success isn't just about making money. It's about making sure the next person doesn't have to go through what we went through. Now, sitting in his corner office in downtown Atlanta, Marcus looked out at the city skyline and made a decision. He wasn't going to announce the acquisition through press releases or corporate communications. He was going to take a flight, the same route his mother had taken, the same airline that had humiliated her. But he wasn't going to wear a suit. He wasn't going to arrive with an entourage or flash his credentials. He was going to dress like a regular person and see exactly how Aerolux treated its passengers when they thought no one important was watching. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Thompson, your car is here. Your flight to Chicago leaves in 3 hours." Marcus grabbed his worn leather duffel bag, the same one he'd carried through college, and headed for the door. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week," he said. "I'm going to be busy." Miami International Airport buzzed with the controlled chaos of a Thursday afternoon. Terminal D Gate B12 was a microcosm of modern air travel-stressed business travelers checking emails, families wrangling luggage, and tourists clutching guidebooks and dreams. Marcus arrived alone. No driver, no assistant, no security detail. He'd taken an Uber from his hotel and walked through the terminal like any other passenger. He found a seat near Gate B12 and observed. Carmen Rodriguez stood behind the gate counter, her name tag slightly crooked, her dark hair escaping from what had probably been a neat ponytail that morning. She was 29, married with 2 kids, and this was the job that paid their rent. Carmen was good at her work, but she'd learned that keeping her job meant following certain unwritten rules. Rules about who got upgrades and who got questioned. Rules about who deserved courtesy and who earned suspicion. She hated those rules, but she needed this job. Victoria Ashford emerged from the jet bridge like a queen surveying her domain. Everything about her was calculated perfection. The way her uniform fit like it had been tailored on Savile Row. The way her makeup looked like she just stepped out of a photo shoot. The way she moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told she didn't belong anywhere. Victoria came from money. Old money. The kind that came with trust funds and country club memberships and the absolute certainty that the world was divided into people like her and people who served people like her. She'd taken the flight attendant job not because she needed it, but because she wanted the travel perks and the power. The power to decide who got treated well and who got reminded of their place. Marcus watched her interact with the gate area. She smiled at the business travelers in expensive suits. She chatted with the elderly white couple discussing their cruise plans. She completely ignored the young black mother trying to manage 2 children in a stroller by herself. Near the window, Ashley Morgan was setting up her phone to capture the perfect airport selfie. Her Instagram account at Ashley Travels documented her adventures as a lifestyle influencer. She had a good eye for content and an even better instinct for when something was about to go viral. She'd been watching the dynamics at the gate for the past 20 minutes, and something felt off. The way the airline staff interacted with passengers seemed to depend entirely on what those passengers looked like. Ashley had 50,000 followers who trusted her to keep things real. She had a feeling they were about to witness something very real indeed. Miguel Santos strutted through the terminal like he owned it. The 31-year-old businessman carried himself with the swagger of someone who had never been denied anything in his life. His Armani suit was perfectly pressed, his Rolex caught the light with every gesture, and his attitude announced to everyone within 50 feet that he was important, and they weren't. Miguel flew Aerolux twice a month and had learned that his charm and his platinum status could get him almost anything. Free upgrades, extra attention from flight attendants. The kind of service that made him feel like the king of his own small universe. He approached the gate counter with the confidence of a man who knew he'd be taken care of. "Carmen, mi amor Miguel," said, leaning against the counter like he was settling into his favorite bar. "How are we doing today?" "Any chance you can work your magic on an upgrade?" Carmen smiled. It was the kind of smile that said she'd had this exact conversation 100 times before. "Mr. Santos, let me see what I can do." Marcus watched the interaction and took notes. Not on paper. Mental notes. The kind that would be very important very soon. The boarding announcement crackled through the gate area. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now beginning pre-boarding for Aerolux Flight 447 to Chicago O'Hare. We'll start with our first-class passengers and Platinum Elite members." Marcus stood up boarding pass in hand and walked toward the gate. Victoria Ashford was about to meet her new boss. She just didn't know it yet. Marcus approached the gate counter with the quiet confidence of a man who had every right to be there. His first-class boarding pass seat 2A was clearly visible in his hand. The barcode was crisp, the Aerolux logo properly positioned, and the class designation unmistakable. Carmen Rodriguez looked up from her computer screen as he approached. For a split second, her professional smile was genuine. Then she saw his hoodie, his jeans, his sneakers. The smile faltered just slightly, but Marcus caught it. "Good afternoon, Marcus," said his voice warm and polite. Checking in for first class. Carmen's fingers hesitated over the scanner. She'd been trained to verify boarding passes, but she'd also been trained, through months of watching Victoria and Captain Mitchell, to ask certain questions when certain passengers didn't look the part. "Could I see your ID with that, please?" Carmen asked, her voice carefully neutral. Marcus handed over his driver's license. Marcus Thompson, Georgia. The name matched the boarding pass exactly. Carmen scanned the boarding pass. The light turned green. The apartment registered first class. Seat 2A, paid fare, no issues. But Carmen had learned that the situation didn't always tell the whole story. "I'm sorry," Carmen said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The apartment is showing some kind of flag on this reservation. It might be a glitch, but I need to verify with my supervisor." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What kind of flag? Just verification of purchase. It happens sometimes with third-party bookings or unusual payment methods." There was nothing third-party about Marcus's booking. He'd purchased it directly through the Aerolux corporate website using a Black American Express Centurion card, the kind of card that required a 7-figure annual income just to qualify. "I booked this through your website," Marcus said calmly. "Is there a specific issue with my reservation?" Carmen's computer screen showed absolutely nothing wrong. But she could feel Victoria watching from across the gate area, and she knew what would happen if she processed a boarding pass that Victoria thought needed additional verification. Miguel Santos appeared at the counter like a storm cloud rolling in. His cologne arrived 3 seconds before he did, and his presence demanded immediate attention. "Carmen, beautiful." Miguel boomed, sliding his Platinum Elite card across the counter with theatrical flourish. "Tell me you've got good news about that upgrade." Carmen's relief was obvious. Here was a passenger she knew how to handle. Someone who fit the profile. Someone Victoria would approve of without question. "Mr. Santos, let me check right now," Carmen said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Marcus stood to the side, still holding his boarding pass, still waiting for an explanation about the mysterious flag on his reservation. Miguel glanced over at Marcus with the kind of dismissive look usually reserved for street vendors or parking attendants. "First-time flying buddy?" he asked with a smirk. "Economy boarding starts in about 20 minutes. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice still perfectly calm. "I have a first-class ticket." Miguel's laugh was sharp and condescending. "Sure you do, friend, sure you do." Victoria Ashford materialized beside the gate counter like she'd been summoned by the scent of potential drama. Her heels clicked against the terminal floor with military precision, and her blue eyes immediately assessed the situation. She saw Carmen looking flustered. She saw Miguel Santos, a passenger she recognized and approved of, waiting for service. And she saw Marcus Thompson, a black man in casual clothes holding what appeared to be a first-class boarding pass. Victoria had been a flight attendant for 8 years, and she'd developed a sixth sense about these situations. In her experience, they usually fell into 2 categories: genuine mistakes by passengers who didn't understand the boarding process, or attempts at fraud by people trying to game the airline. Looking at Marcus, Victoria immediately decided which category this was. Carmen Victoria said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Is there a problem here?" The apartment scanned his boarding pass as legitimate, Carmen said carefully, "but given the circumstances, I thought you should verify." Victoria looked at Marcus's boarding pass, then at Marcus himself. The math didn't add up in her mind. First-class tickets cost $3.200. The man standing in front of her looked like he shopped at Target. Sir Victoria said, her voice taking on the tone she usually reserved for unruly children. "Could you tell me how you acquired this ticket? I purchased it," Marcus said simply. "Where? Through your website. When this morning?" Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "This morning? A same-day first-class ticket on this route costs over $3,000. You paid $3,000 this morning for a plane ticket." The question hung in the air like an accusation. Around the gate area, other passengers were beginning to notice the conversation. Ashley Morgan, who had been pretending to scroll through Instagram while actually eavesdropping quietly, opened her camera app. "Yes," Marcus said, his voice still maddeningly calm. "I paid full fare." Victoria exchanged a look with Miguel Santos, who shook his head with theatrical disbelief. Sir Victoria continued, "We're going to need some additional verification. First-class tickets require appropriate documentation of payment. My credit card receipt and ID aren't sufficient documentation given the circumstances. No." What circumstances? Victoria's pause lasted exactly 3 seconds too long. Just long enough for everyone listening to understand exactly what circumstances she was referring to. "Unusual purchasing patterns," Victoria said finally. "We need to verify that this ticket wasn't purchased with stolen credit card information or frequent flyer miles that don't belong to you." Ashley Morgan's thumb hit the record button on her phone. This was definitely about to get viral. Marcus pulled out his wallet, a simple black leather bifold worn smooth from years of use, and removed his American Express Centurion card. The black card was unmistakable, its weight and heft immediately recognizable to anyone who understood luxury credit instruments. Victoria had seen these cards before. They were the kind of payment method that required net worth in the millions just to qualify. But looking at Marcus, she couldn't reconcile what she was seeing. "This is my credit card," Marcus said, placing it on the counter next to his ID and boarding pass. "Feel free to verify it." Victoria picked up the card, examined it, and felt her first flicker of doubt. The card was real. The name matched, but her worldview didn't allow room for black men in hoodies to carry American Express Centurion cards. "I'll need to call this in," Victoria said. "Security policy." It wasn't security policy. It was Victoria policy. Miguel Santos, watching the drama unfold, decided to make himself part of the entertainment. "Look, a friend," he said to Marcus, "maybe you used your boss's card or something. It happens, no judgment. But let's not hold up the line for us premium passengers." The word "us" was carefully chosen. Miguel was drawing a line in the sand, and he wanted everyone to know which side of it Marcus belonged on. Carmen Rodriguez felt sick. She knew exactly what was happening, and she knew it was wrong. But she also knew that challenging Victoria in front of passengers was a firing offense. She had 2 kids and a mortgage, and she couldn't afford to lose this job over principles. "Ma'am," Marcus said to Victoria, "could you please explain what specific policy requires additional verification for my ticket?" Sir Victoria replied, her voice rising just enough to ensure maximum audience when passengers present payment methods that appear inconsistent with their presentation. "We have to verify. It's for everyone's safety." That was when Marcus knew this wasn't about policy or verification or safety. This was about power. This was about a woman who had never been challenged deciding that she was going to teach someone a lesson about knowing their place. Ashley Morgan's livestream was now active, broadcasting to her 50,000 followers in real time. The comments were already flowing. "OMG, is this really happening? This is so messed up. Someone needs to expose this airline. I'm recording this too in case her stream goes down." Sir Victoria continued, "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while we handle our premium passengers. Security will be here shortly to verify your documentation." She hadn't called security, but the threat was clear. Marcus looked around the gate area. He saw Carmen Rodriguez, who couldn't meet his eyes. He saw Miguel Santos, who was clearly enjoying the show. He saw Ashley Morgan, who was holding her phone in a way that suggested she was recording. He saw a dozen other passengers who had stopped their conversations to watch the confrontation unfold. And he saw Victoria Ashford standing there with her perfect hair and her perfect makeup, and her absolute certainty that she was in control of this situation. Marcus made a decision. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying just enough volume to ensure everyone could hear him. I understand you have concerns about my ticket. To avoid any further delays for your other passengers, I'll accept whatever seat you have available." Victoria's smile was triumphant. This was how these situations were supposed to end, with people accepting their place in the hierarchy. "We have a lovely seat available in economy," Victoria said. "Row 34, middle seat. It's all we have left, but I'm sure you'll find it adequate." "I'll take 34B, Marcus said. "I wouldn't want to miss this flight for anything." The way he said it made Ashley Morgan's skin crawl. There was something in his voice that suggested this story was far from over. She adjusted her phone angle to make sure she caught everything. Victoria printed out a new boarding pass and slapped it on the counter with the satisfied flourish of a queen granting mercy to a peasant. "There you go, sir," she said. "Enjoy your flight." Marcus picked up the boarding pass, looked at it, and smiled. It was the same smile he'd given her earlier. Polite, professional, absolutely terrifying if you knew how to read it. "Thank you, Victoria," he said, reading her name tag carefully. "I'll be sure to remember this experience." Victoria Ashford had just sealed her fate. She just didn't know it yet. As Marcus walked toward the jet bridge, Ashley Morgan's live stream exploded with activity. Her viewer count had jumped from 500 to 5000 in the space of 15 minutes. The hashtags #HashGateDrama and #AeroLuxShame were already trending in Miami. Carmen Rodriguez watched Marcus disappear down the jet bridge and felt like she was going to throw up. She just participated in something that would replay in her nightmares for years. Miguel Santos adjusted his Armani jacket and strutted towards first class, completely satisfied with the entertainment. Victoria Ashford smoothed her skirt, checked her reflection in her phone screen, and prepared to board the flight that would destroy her career. The countdown was almost over. The Aerolux Boeing 737, 800, stretched before Marcus like a study in inequality. The first-class cabin gleamed with leather seats the color of fresh cream, each one wide enough for two people with built-in massage functions and personal entertainment apartments that rivaled home theaters. The lighting was soft and warm, designed to make passengers feel like they were entering an exclusive club rather than a metal tube hurtling through the sky. Economy class told a different story. The seats were cramped, covered in blue fabric that had seen better decades, and packed together with the mathematical precision of someone trying to fit the maximum number of humans into the minimum amount of space. Seat 34B was exactly what Victoria had promised, a middle seat between a crying baby and a man whose shoulders spilled well into the neighboring seats. The armrests were hard plastic, the legroom was non-existent, and the overhead bin was already stuffed with other passengers' luggage. Marcus squeezed himself into the seat and immediately understood that this wasn't just about class of service. This was about sending a message. Victoria Ashford had chosen this specific seat because she wanted him to be miserable. She wanted him to understand that defying her authority came with consequences. What Victoria didn't understand was that Marcus had grown up sleeping on a fold-out couch in a one-bedroom apartment in East Atlanta. He'd done homework by streetlight when the electricity was shut off. He'd worn the same shoes to school for 3 years because they were the only pair his mother could afford. A cramped airline seat wasn't torture. It was just uncomfortable, and Marcus had bigger things to worry about than his comfort. While Miguel Santos settled into his upgraded first-class seat, the same seat 2A that should have been Marcus's, and immediately began demanding champagne. Marcus pulled out a small notebook and began documenting everything he observed. He noted the timestamp 3:47 p.m. He noted Victoria's name and employee number from her badge. He noted Carmen's reluctant participation. He noted Miguel's enthusiastic encouragement of the discrimination. But most importantly, he noted the faces of the other passengers who had witnessed the gate incident. Because Marcus understood that in the age of social media, witnesses were more powerful than lawyers. As Flight 447 reached cruising altitude, the difference in service became immediately apparent. Victoria Ashford transformed herself into a completely different person the moment she entered the first-class cabin. Her voice became warm and sultry, her smile genuine, her attention laser-focused on the needs and desires of her premium passengers. Mr. Santos Victoria purred as she approached his seat. "How wonderful to have you flying with us again. Can I start you with some champagne? We have Dom Perignon 2010 available today." Miguel leaned back in his leather seat like a king accepting tribute. "Victoria, darling, you know exactly what I like. And perhaps some of those warm nuts. The macadamia ones. Of course, Mr. Santos. Anything for our valued passengers." The contrast was stark when Victoria finally made her way to economy class 20 minutes later. Her smile disappeared the moment she passed through the curtain that separated the premium cabin from the rest of the plane. Her voice became flat and professional, her movements efficient but cold. When she reached Marcus's row, she didn't make eye contact. "Beverages?" she asked the passenger in the aisle seat. "Could I get some water?" Marcus asked politely. Victoria didn't turn toward him. "We'll get to everyone when we can," she said, already moving to the next row. The man with the crying baby, a young father traveling alone, tried to flag down Victoria for help warming a bottle. She walked past him twice without acknowledging his raised hand. An elderly black woman in row 36 asked if she could get an extra pillow for her arthritis. Victoria told her they were reserved for premium passengers. Ashley Morgan, who had managed to get herself moved to an aisle seat 3 rows behind Marcus, was documenting everything. Her phone was discreetly positioned to capture Victoria's interactions, and her followers were watching the drama unfold in real time. The contrast was so obvious that even passengers who hadn't witnessed the gate incident began to notice. A white businessman in row 32 commented to his seatmate that the service seemed oddly inconsistent. A college student posted on Twitter that she was watching the most unprofessional flight attendant ever refuse basic service to black passengers. Marcus took notes on everything. The timestamps, the specific requests that were denied. The passengers who were ignored versus those who received immediate attention. He was building a case, and Victoria Ashford was providing him with all the evidence he needed. 30 minutes into the flight, Captain Robert Mitchell decided to make one of his famous cabin walks. At 45, Mitchell was old-school aviation, the kind of pilot who believed that flying was a profession for gentlemen, and that passengers should be grateful for the privilege of his service. Mitchell had started his career when airlines still served full meals in economy and when flight attendants were required to be unmarried women under 35. He missed those days. He missed the natural hierarchy that kept everyone in their proper place. Mitchell strode through first class like a celebrity making an appearance. He shook hands with Miguel Santos, complimented an elderly white woman on her jewelry, and made small talk about golf with a businessman heading to a conference. When he reached economy class, his demeanor changed completely. He walked faster, made less eye contact, and treated the passengers like cargo that happened to be conscious. But Marcus Thompson presented a special case. Victoria had briefed Mitchell about the situation at the gate, a passenger who had tried to use a suspicious first-class ticket and had required adjustment to his proper seat. Mitchell decided he needed to see this troublemaker for himself. Sir Mitchell said, stopping beside Marcus's row, "I understand you had some issues during boarding." Marcus looked up calmly. "No issues, Captain. Just a misunderstanding about my seat assignment, right? Well, I hope you understand that we have policies for a reason. Airlines have to be very careful about fraud these days." The word fraud was spoken loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. It was meant to embarrass Marcus, to make him feel like a criminal who had been caught and punished. "I understand completely," Marcus said. "I'm sure Aerolux takes its policies very seriously." There was something in Marcus's tone that made Mitchell pause. It was too calm, too controlled. Most passengers who got downgraded from first class were angry or embarrassed. This man sounded almost amused. "Just want to make sure we understand each other," Mitchell said, his voice carrying a subtle threat. "Oh, Captain Mitchell Marcus," said, reading the man's name tag, "I think we understand each other perfectly." Ashley Morgan caught the entire interaction on video. The comments on her live stream were exploding. "This captain is a piece of work. How is this legal?" Someone needs to report this airline. I'm never flying Aerolux again. The incident that would become the centerpiece of the eventual lawsuit happened 45 minutes into the flight. The plane hit a patch of moderate turbulence. Nothing dangerous, but enough to turn on the seatbelt sign and send the flight attendants to their jump seats. In row 35, an elderly woman was struggling to reach her medication in the overhead bin. Her husband was trying to help, but at 78 years old with a recent hip replacement, he couldn't safely stand during the turbulence. Marcus, despite being trapped in the middle seat, could see the situation developing. The woman needed her heart medication, and she needed it quickly. Her breathing was becoming labored, and her husband was starting to panic. Without thinking about the seatbelt sign, or the turbulence, or the potential consequences, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up to help. "Sir, sit down." Victoria's voice exploded through the cabin like a gunshot. She was strapped into her jump seat in the forward galley, but her voice carried the authority of someone who was accustomed to absolute obedience. "The lady needs her medication," Marcus called back, reaching for the overhead bin. "Economy passengers need to stay in their seats during turbulence. This is a safety issue." Marcus retrieved the medication and handed it to the elderly woman, who immediately put a pill under her tongue. Her husband squeezed Marcus's hand in gratitude. "Sit down now, or I will have you restrained." The entire economy section had gone silent. Passengers were staring at Marcus, at Victoria, and at each other, trying to understand how helping an elderly woman access her heart medication had become grounds for restraint. Marcus returned to his seat and calmly buckled his seatbelt. Victoria was already on the interphone to the cockpit. "Captain Mitchell, we have a disruptive passenger in 34B. He's refusing to follow crew instructions and creating a safety hazard." The response was immediate. The turbulence had cleared, and Captain Mitchell appeared in the economy cabin within 60 seconds, his face flushed with anger and authority. Sir Mitchell announced, his voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, "You have been identified as a disruptive passenger. We have the authority to remove you from this aircraft at our next stop if this behavior continues." Captain Marcus said, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "I was helping an elderly passenger access her medication. She was having a medical emergency. You violated federal aviation regulations by unbuckling during turbulence. That's a felony offense. It wasn't a felony offense. Mitchell knew it, Marcus knew it, and several passengers who understood aviation law knew it. But the threat was designed to intimidate, to make Marcus back down and accept his place in the hierarchy. I understand your concern," Marcus said. "I'll comply with all crew instructions for the remainder of the flight." "You're damn right you will," Mitchell said. "One more outburst and you'll be explaining your behavior to federal marshals." Ashley Morgan's live stream viewer count had jumped to 15,000. The comments were coming so fast she couldn't read them. "This is insane. He was helping someone having a heart attack. These people are sick. Someone, please tell me this is being reported." While Victoria and Captain Mitchell were congratulating themselves on putting a disruptive passenger in his place, Marcus was conducting the most important business meeting of his life. It just happened to be taking place in seat 34B at 35,000 feet. He discreetly pulled out his phone and began typing messages. To his general counsel. "Linda, I need termination paperwork prepared for the following employees. We'll send details shortly. This is time sensitive." To his head of HR, James, prepare for immediate policy changes at Aerolux. We're implementing new anti-discrimination protocols effective immediately. To his public relations director, Sarah, we're about to have a major public relations situation. Good news, we're the heroes. We'll call with details when I land. To his assistant, clear my schedule for the rest of the week. Cancel the London meetings. We're rebuilding an airline. But the most important message was to his mother, "Mom, remember that airline that kicked you off the plane 20 years ago? I just bought it. The people who humiliated me today don't know it yet, but they're about to learn what real consequences look like. Love you." Dorothy Thompson's response came back immediately. "Baby, make sure you do it right. Don't just get revenge. Make it better for the next person." As Marcus typed his response, "That's exactly what I'm going to do." He looked around the cabin and began making his final notes. He noted that Victoria had served Miguel Santos 3 glasses of champagne while refusing to bring water to economy passengers. He noted that Captain Mitchell had spent 15 minutes chatting with the first-class passengers while treating economy travelers like potential criminals. He noted that not one single crew member, had checked on the elderly woman who had needed her heart medication. But he also noted something else. He noted the passengers who had offered to help when Victoria refused service. He noted the businessman who had shared his snacks with the family next to him when no meal service came to economy. He noted Ashley Morgan, who was still broadcasting the entire incident to a growing audience of outraged viewers. Marcus was learning something important about Aerolux Airlines. The problem wasn't just individual employees like Victoria and Mitchell. The problem was a culture that had taught them that discrimination was not only acceptable, but expected. That culture was about to change. Permanently. As Flight 447 cruised over Tennessee at 35,000 feet, Marcus Thompson was conducting the most consequential conference call of his career. Using the aircraft's Wi-Fi and his noise-canceling earbuds, he connected with his senior leadership team for what would later be known as the Emergency Ownership Activation Meeting. Linda Marcus said quietly, speaking to his general counsel, "I need you to listen very carefully. I'm currently on an Aerolux flight, and I've just witnessed the most egregious display of customer discrimination I've ever seen. We need to move fast." Linda Richardson had been Marcus's lawyer for 8 years. She'd helped him navigate acquisitions worth billions of dollars, but she'd never heard this tone in his voice before. Cold. Focused. Absolutely furious. "What do you need?" Linda asked. "Termination paperwork for the following employees: Victoria Ashford, Senior Flight Attendant, Employee number 47291. Captain Robert Mitchell, Pilot, Employee number 12847. I want them effective immediately upon landing. Marcus, we literally just acquired the company this morning. Don't you think we should?" "Linda, they just discriminated against me personally for 2 hours while I documented everything. They refused me service, humiliated me in front of other passengers, and threatened to have me arrested for helping an elderly woman access her heart medication. I'm not interested in gradual change or sensitivity training. I'm interested in immediate consequences." Linda was already typing. "Consider it done. What else? Connect me with James in HR. We're implementing new policies effective immediately." James Williams, Marcus's Director of Human Resources, joined the call from his office in Atlanta. "James, how quickly can we implement company-wide anti-discrimination training for all Aerolux employees?" "Well, normally we'd need to develop curriculum schedule sessions, coordinate with unions." "James, we don't have time for normal. I want every employee in this company to understand by tomorrow morning that discrimination will result in immediate termination. No warnings, no second chances, no appeals process." "How do we make that happen?" "We could send a company-wide email, update the employee handbook, and schedule emergency briefings for all departments. If we work through the night, we could have new policies in place by morning. Do it. And James, I want personal accountability at every level. Supervisors who allow discrimination happen on their watch get terminated along with the employees who commit it. This stops here." The third call was to Sarah Chen, his Director of Public Relations. Marcus had to smile when he realized he was about to give Sarah the easiest job of her career. "Sarah, in about 2 hours, there's going to be video footage all over the internet of Aerolux employees discriminating against passengers. The good news is that I'm the passenger and I own the company." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Oh my God, you were undercover accidentally. I just wanted to see how they treated regular passengers. Turns out they treat black passengers like criminals, and first-class passengers like royalty, regardless of who actually paid for what ticket." "This is actually perfect," Sarah said, and Marcus could hear the excitement in her voice. "We get to be the company that immediately fires racist employees and implements zero-tolerance policies. We're the heroes of our own story." "Exactly. Draft a press release announcing our new anti-discrimination policies and the immediate termination of employees who violate them. But Don't release it until I give you the go-ahead. I want to handle this face-to-face first. The final call was the most important one. Mom, baby. How was your flight? Did you get to see how they treat their passengers? I saw exactly how they treat their passengers, Mama. And you were right, it hasn't gotten better. Dorothy Thompson sighed. Her son was a billionaire, but she could still hear the hurt in his voice. The same hurt she'd heard 20 years ago when he was just a teenager listening to her story about being humiliated on an airplane. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to fire the people who did it. But more than that, I'm going to make sure it never happens again. To anyone, good. But Marcus, yes, ma'am. Don't just tear it down, build it back up better. These people have families too. Some of them are just following bad leadership. Fix the leadership, train the people who can be trained, and give everyone a chance to do better. That's exactly what I'm going to do. As Marcus ended the call, he realized that his mother had just given him the blueprint for everything that would happen next. While Marcus was quietly organizing the restructuring of Aerolux Airlines from Seat 34. Victoria Ashford was holding court in the first-class galley, regaling her colleagues with the story of how she'd handled the problem passenger. You should have seen his face when I told him the ticket was suspicious. Victoria told Brenda Morrison, a junior flight attendant who was hanging on every word. He actually thought he could intimidate me with that credit card. Please, you can buy fake credit cards on the internet for $50. Brenda nodded enthusiastically. She was 24, new to the job, and desperate to fit in with the senior crew members. Victoria had taken her under her wing, and Brenda was eager to learn what it took to succeed in the airline industry. What about Captain Mitchell? Brenda asked. He seemed pretty angry about the whole thing. Brad knows how to handle these situations, Victoria said with satisfaction. He's old school. He understands that respect has to be earned, and some people need to be reminded of their place. Victoria had been having an affair with Captain Mitchell for 6 months. It wasn't love, it was convenience and mutual ego validation. They were both married, both bored, and both enjoyed the power that came with controlling other people's travel experiences. The problem with airlines today, Victoria continued, is that we've forgotten that flying used to be special. It used to be for people who could afford it. People who knew how to behave. People who understood that service comes with respect. She gestured toward the economy cabin with obvious disdain. Now we pack people in like cattle and act surprised when they don't know how to act. Brenda absorbed every word. This was exactly the kind of insider knowledge she'd hoped to gain by working for Aerolux. Victoria seemed so sophisticated, so knowledgeable about the industry. If Victoria said this was how things worked, then this must be how things worked. What about the passenger in 34? Davy, Brenda asked. Do you think he'll file a complaint? Victoria laughed. With what money? You think someone who tries to scam their way into first class can afford a lawyer? These people complain to customer service sends them a $50 voucher, and they go away happy. What Victoria didn't know was that every word of this conversation was being overheard by Ashley Morgan, who was using the lavatory directly adjacent to the galley. Ashley had her phone recording, and Victoria's voice was coming through clearly enough to capture on audio. The conversation that would ultimately cost Victoria her career was being documented in real time by a social media influencer who understood exactly how damaging this kind of content could be. Ashley Morgan's live stream of the gate incident had started with 500 viewers. By the time Flight 447 was halfway to Chicago, she had 25,000 people watching live and another 100,000 viewing the recorded segments. The hashtag #AeroluxShame was trending in 3 cities. The hashtag #Victoria Ashford was trending nationally. Video clips were being shared across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook faster than the airline's social media team could track them. The comments were brutal. I've never seen anything this disgusting from an airline. That flight attendant needs to be fired immediately. How is this legal in 2024? I'm calling Aerolux customer service right now. Someone, please tell me this man sued the hell out of them, but the most telling comments came from other airline employees. I work for Delta, and this is not how we treat passengers. United employee here. This woman would be fired in 24 hours at my airline. I'm a flight attendant, and I'm disgusted by this behavior. Major news outlets were starting to pick up the story. CNN's travel correspondent had retweeted Ashley's original video. The Washington Post's transportation reporter was already drafting an article about airline discrimination. Fox News was preparing a segment about customer service in the travel industry. Aerolux customer service department was being overwhelmed with calls. The phone lines were jammed with angry passengers demanding explanations, flight cancellations, and refunds. The company's stock price had dropped 3% in after-hours trading. But the most important viewer of Ashley's live stream was someone Victoria Ashford had never heard of, Dorothy Thompson, who was watching her son get discriminated against in real time from her living room in Atlanta. Dorothy had raised Marcus to be strong, to be dignified, and to fight injustice wherever he found it. Watching him maintain his composure while being humiliated by people who didn't even know they were attacking their own boss filled her with both pride and fury. She called her sister her pastor and 6 of her closest friends. Within 30 minutes, Marcus's story was being shared throughout Atlanta's black community, including several influential business leaders and civil rights organizations. The viral explosion was just beginning. At Aerolux's corporate headquarters in Dallas, the emergency started at 6:47 p.m. when the company's social media manager noticed an unusual spike in negative mentions across all platforms. By 7:15 p.m., the Director of Communications was on a conference call with the CEO, the Chief Operating Officer, and the Head of Customer Service. By 7:30 p.m., they realized they had a full-blown crisis on their hands. The video has been viewed over 200,000 times, the social media manager reported. It's being shared faster than we can track. The passenger appears to be a well-dressed black man who was refused his first-class seat and forced into economy. The flight crew's behavior is problematic. How problematic? Asked the CEO. Lawsuit-level problematic. Possibly criminal-level problematic. The flight attendant is on camera making what appear to be racially motivated decisions about who deserves premium service. The chief operating officer was frantically trying to pull employee records. The flight attendant is Victoria Ashford, 8 years with the company, generally good performance reviews. The captain is Robert Mitchell, 15 years, also good reviews. What none of them knew was that in approximately 90 minutes, they would all be receiving termination notices themselves. The new owner had very different standards for what constituted acceptable behavior, and the old leadership team's definition of good performance was about to become irrelevant. We need to get ahead of this, the CEO said. Draft an apology statement, offer the passenger compensation, and put both employees on administrative leave pending investigation. Sir, the communications director said carefully, the optics of this are really bad. The passenger was clearly discriminated against, and it's all on video. A standard apology might not be enough. Then what do you suggest? Immediate termination of the employees involved and a public commitment to comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all staff. The CEO was quiet for a long moment. Aerolux had been struggling financially for 2 years. They couldn't afford to lose any more customers, and they certainly couldn't afford a discrimination lawsuit. Fine. Draft termination letters and schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. We're going to fire them and make it clear that this behavior is unacceptable. What the CEO didn't realize was that he'd just made exactly the same decision that the new owner had made 2 hours earlier. The only difference was that Marcus Thompson was going to implement it personally, immediately, and with a lot more authority. As Flight 447 began its descent into Chicago, O'Hare, 3 separate plans were converging. Victoria Ashford was planning to file a report about the disruptive passenger in 34B. Aerolux executive team was planning to fire Victoria Ashford to contain the public relations disaster. And Marcus Thompson was planning to fire everyone involved and rebuild the entire company culture from the ground up. Only one of these plans was going to succeed. Captain Mitchell's voice crackled through the intercom as Flight 447 began its descent into Chicago. O'Hare, ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent. The weather in Chicago is clear temperature 72 degrees, and we should have you on the ground in about 20 minutes. Marcus Thompson checked his watch, 5:47 p.m. Central Time. In exactly 13 minutes, he would stand up and introduce himself to his new employees. He'd been mentally rehearsing this moment for the past hour, but now that it was approaching, he felt the familiar calm that came over him before every major business decision. Victoria Ashford was in the forward galley, touching up her lipstick and preparing for landing procedures. She'd already decided that she would file a formal complaint about the passenger in 34B. Disruptive passengers needed to be documented, and she wanted to make sure that Marcus Thompson was flagged in the airline's apartment as someone who required additional scrutiny on future flights. She had no idea that there wouldn't be any future flights for her to worry about. Ashley Morgan had ended her live stream but kept her phone ready for recording. Her follower count had jumped by 5,000 in the past 3 hours, and she'd received messages from local news stations asking if she'd be willing to be interviewed about what she'd witnessed. She had a feeling that this story was far from over. Miguel Santos was already planning his Instagram post about another successful business trip. He'd gotten the upgrade, received excellent service, and enjoyed watching someone get put in their place. In his mind, the flight had been a perfect example of how air travel should work. Brenda Morrison was nervously checking her uniform and trying not to think about the passenger who'd been treated so poorly. She'd been trained to follow Victoria's lead, but something about the whole situation felt wrong. The man in 34B hadn't seemed disruptive. He'd seemed dignified. Carmen Rodriguez was at the gate in Chicago, preparing for the arrival. She'd spent the entire flight feeling sick about what had happened in Miami. She kept thinking about her own father, who'd worked construction for 30 years and had faced his share of discrimination. She wondered what she would tell him if he ever found out how she'd treated that passenger. Captain Mitchell was running through his post-flight checklist, but part of his mind was still on the confrontation with the economy passenger. Something about the man's reaction bothered him. Most people who got dressed down by a captain either became apologetic or angry. This passenger had become amused. As the plane touched down at O'Hare and taxied toward the gate, Marcus Thompson gathered his belongings and prepared for the most important performance of his career. The aircraft door opened at 6:03 p.m. Victoria Ashford positioned herself at the entrance to first class, smiling her perfect smile, and bidding farewell to the premium passengers who had made her flight worthwhile. "Thank you for flying Aerolux, Mr. Santos," she purred as Miguel exited. "We look forward to seeing you again soon. Always a pleasure, Victoria." Miguel replied, pausing to slip her a $20 tip. "You know how to take care of the right people." Economy passengers began filing out behind the first-class travelers. Victoria's smile became automatic, professional, meaningless. She was already thinking about her hotel, her dinner plans, and the complaint report she needed to file. When Marcus Thompson reached the aircraft door, Victoria didn't even look at him. She was busy checking her phone, probably reviewing her schedule for the next day. "Excuse me, Victoria." Victoria looked up, annoyed at being interrupted. The passenger from 34B was standing in front of her, but something was different. His posture was different. His voice was different. The casual deference he'd shown during the flight was gone, replaced by something that looked distinctly like authority. "Yes," Victoria said, her voice carrying the impatient edge of someone who was officially off duty. "I need to speak with you and Captain Mitchell for a moment." "Could you ask him to step out of the cockpit?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Sir, the captain doesn't meet with economy passengers. If you have a complaint, you can call customer service." "Actually," Marcus said, his voice carrying just enough volume for the remaining passengers to hear, "Captain Mitchell is going to want to hear this personally." Something in his tone made Victoria pause. Ashley Morgan, who was 3 passengers back in the exit line, quietly opened her camera app. "Sir, I don't know what you think," Victoria Marcus interrupted. "Please call Captain Mitchell out here. Now." The word now was delivered with unmistakable authority. Victoria had been taking orders from men for 8 years, and she recognized the tone of someone who expected immediate obedience. Captain Mitchell Victoria called toward the cockpit, her voice uncertain for the first time all day. "Could you come here for a moment?" Captain Mitchell emerged from the cockpit still wearing his uniform jacket, his captain's stripes gleaming under the cabin lights. He saw Victoria looking flustered and Marcus Thompson standing calmly beside her. "Is there a problem?" Mitchell asked, his voice carrying the automatic authority of a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "No problem," Captain Marcus said. "Just an introduction that's overdue." Marcus reached into his leather duffel bag, the same bag that Victoria had dismissed as cheap and worn, and pulled out a leather portfolio. From the portfolio he extracted 2 documents, his driver's license and a letter bearing the Aerolux corporate seal. "My name is Marcus Thompson," he said, handing the documents to Captain Mitchell. "I'm the CEO of Thompson Ventures. As of 6:30 this morning, Thompson Ventures owns 78% of Aerolux Airlines." The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally, pure terror. Captain Mitchell stared at the documents in his hands. The letter was official Aerolux letterhead, signed by the board of directors, announcing the acquisition and naming Marcus Thompson as the new majority owner. "That's impossible," Victoria whispered. "Actually, Marcus said it's quite possible, and remarkably well documented." Ashley Morgan was recording everything. The remaining passengers had stopped exiting and were now watching the drama unfold. Word was spreading through the aircraft that something extraordinary was happening. Captain Mitchell Marcus continued, his voice calm and professional, in the past 3 hours. "You and your crew have provided me with a comprehensive case study in exactly why this airline was failing before I acquired it." Mitchell's face was turning red. "Sir, if there was some kind of misunderstanding—" "There was no misunderstanding," Marcus interrupted. "There was deliberate, documented discrimination. Victoria refused to honor my first-class ticket based entirely on my appearance. You, personally, threatened to have me arrested for helping an elderly passenger access her heart medication, and both of you treated economy passengers like criminals while fawning over premium passengers who tipped you $20. Victoria tried to speak. "Mr. Thompson, if I had known who you were, if you had known who I was—" Marcus's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Victoria, the problem isn't that you didn't recognize me. The problem is that you treated me differently based on what I looked like. The problem is that you would have continued treating other passengers exactly the same way if I hadn't been here to witness it." Miguel Santos, who had been lingering near the gate, heard the commotion and came back to investigate. When he realized what was happening, his face went pale. "Mr. Thompson," Miguel said, "I had no idea who you were. If I had known," Miguel Marcus said without turning around, "you encouraged discrimination against another passenger because you thought it would get you better service. Your frequent flyer status with Aerolux is permanently revoked." The gathered passengers began to murmur among themselves. Someone was filming with their phone. Ashley Morgan's camera was capturing everything. "This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a public reckoning," Victoria Marcus continued. "You're terminated effective immediately. Captain Mitchell, you're grounded pending a full investigation, but I suspect you'll be looking for new employment very soon." "You can't do this." Victoria's perfect composure finally cracked. "I have rights, I have a contract. You can't fire someone for doing their job." "Your job," Marcus said, "was to provide professional service to all passengers regardless of their appearance or the class of service they purchased. You failed spectacularly. Security will escort you from the airport." "This is discrimination," Victoria shouted. "You're firing me because I'm white." The irony of her statement hung in the air like smoke. Ashley Morgan caught every word on video. Victoria Marcus said quietly, "I'm firing you because you're racist. There's a difference." Captain Mitchell tried one last desperate play. "Mr. Thompson, I've been flying for 20 years. I have an exemplary safety record. Surely we can discuss this professionally. Captain, your safety record is irrelevant to your character. In the past 3 hours, you've demonstrated that you believe some passengers deserve dignity and others don't. That's not the kind of judgment I want in the cockpit of my aircraft." Marcus turned to address the gathered passengers, his voice carrying the authority of ownership. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you had to witness discrimination on this flight. This is not the standard of service that Aerolux will maintain going forward. Effective immediately, this airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind." The passengers began to applaud. Someone shouted, "It's about time." An elderly black woman in a wheelchair smiled and nodded her approval. Carmen Rodriguez appeared in the jet bridge drawn by the commotion. When she saw what was happening, she stopped dead in her tracks. Carmen Marcus called to her, "Could you join us, please?" Carmen approached slowly, her face a mixture of shame and fear. "Carmen, you participated in the discrimination at the gate. However, I noticed that you seemed uncomfortable with it. You have a choice. You can undergo comprehensive customer service retraining and keep your job, or you can look for employment elsewhere. What would you prefer?" Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Thompson, I have 2 children. I need this job. But what we did to you was wrong. I knew it was wrong when it was happening, and I'm ashamed that I didn't stand up for you. Carmen, honesty and accountability are the foundation of good customer service. Report to the training department tomorrow morning. You're being promoted to gate supervisor effective next week." The transformation was immediate and visible. Carmen's shame turned to gratitude, her fear to determination. Victoria Marcus said, turning back to the terminated flight attendant, "Airport security is waiting to escort you out. Your personal items will be mailed to your address on file." "This isn't over," Victoria said, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. "I'll sue you for wrongful termination. I'll sue Aerolux." Victoria Marcus interrupted. "You're welcome to try. My legal team will be very interested in reviewing the video evidence of your behavior today. I suspect they'll recommend a countersuit for violation of federal civil rights laws." Ashley Morgan stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Ashley Morgan. I live-streamed the entire incident to about 30,000 viewers. I'd like to interview you about what just happened here." Marcus smiled. "Ashley, I'd be happy to speak with you, but first I need to make some phone calls. I have an airline to rebuild." As security escorted Victoria and Captain Mitchell away from the aircraft, Marcus Thompson pulled out his phone and made the call he'd been planning for 3 hours. "Sarah, it's Marcus. Release the press statement." Quote, "Aerolux Airlines announces the immediate termination of employees who engaged in discriminatory behavior during Flight 447 from Miami to Chicago. The airline's new ownership is committed to providing respectful professional service to all passengers regardless of race appearance or economic status. Zero tolerance means zero tolerance." He paused, watching Victoria disappear around the corner, flanked by 2 security officers. "And Sarah, schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. I want to announce our new customer service standards personally." Marcus ended the call and turned to Ashley Morgan, who was still recording. "Ashley, you asked for an interview. Here's what I want your viewers to know. Discrimination doesn't just hurt the people who experience it directly. It hurts everyone who witnesses it and says nothing. It hurts companies that allow it. And it hurts society that tolerates it." The camera captured every word. Today, Aerolux Airlines learned that actions have consequences. But more importantly, our passengers learned that their dignity matters more than their bank account or the color of their skin. As Marcus Thompson walked through the jet bridge toward the terminal, he wasn't just ending a flight. He was beginning a revolution. The video of Victoria Ashford being escorted away by security would be viewed 2 million times in the next 24 hours. The video of Captain Mitchell's termination would become a case study in business schools. And the video of Marcus Thompson's impromptu press conference would become a viral sensation about justice, accountability, and the power of doing the right thing. But the most important video, the one that would change everything, was still being recorded by Ashley Morgan as Marcus disappeared into the terminal, already planning the transformation of an entire industry. The revelation was complete. The revolution was just beginning. At 6:47 p.m. Central Time, Marcus Thompson sat in the VIP lounge at Chicago O'Hare and initiated the most consequential conference call in Aerolux Airlines history. Within the next 2 hours, he would completely restructure the leadership policies and culture of a company that employed 12,000 people across 4 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus said to the 17 executives who had joined the emergency video conference, "My name is Marcus Thompson, and as of this morning, I own this airline. What you're about to hear may shock you, but I need your complete attention and immediate action." The faces on his laptop screen showed a mixture of confusion and concern. Most of Aerolux senior leadership had never heard of Marcus Thompson or Thompson Ventures. The acquisition had been handled at the board level with such speed and secrecy that operational management was still in the dark. In the past 6 hours, I have personally experienced the most egregious display of customer discrimination I have ever witnessed. It was perpetrated by your employees, enabled by your policies, and defended by your management. This ends today. Linda Richardson, his general counsel, appeared on screen from her Atlanta office, her laptop surrounded by legal documents and termination paperwork. "Linda, do you have the employment records I requested?" "Yes, Marcus. Victoria Ashford has been terminated for cause as of 6:15 p.m. Captain Robert Mitchell is terminated pending a 24-hour review period for union compliance. Both terminations are effective immediately, and their access to company apartments has been revoked." Marcus turned his attention to the Aerolux executives who were still trying to understand what was happening to their company. "James Williams, my Director of Human Resources, is going to outline the new anti-discrimination policies that will be implemented company-wide effective immediately." James Williams appeared on screen, his background showing stacks of employee handbooks and training manuals. "Effective 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Every Aerolux employee will receive the following message. Discrimination of any kind against passengers or colleagues will result in immediate termination. No warnings, no second chances, no appeals process. Supervisors who allow discrimination to occur will be terminated along with the employees who commit it. This policy applies to every level of the organization." The Aerolux executives began to speak over each other.